Hello and welcome to Teal Tinted Glasses. Tonight we are going to talk about what animal we are. We're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins. We might also discuss if the franchise is ruined because we didn't sign a 7th round pick. All that more right after this. But first, as you know, if you want to join us, you can talk to us in the chat. You can tweet at us. You can Facebook us. You can do everything. And you can also find this on tealtownusa.com after the fact. But right now, it is me. It is Kevin Lacey. It is Mr. Hockey Jerk. And guys, when we started this show, I didn't ask you guys a very, very important question. Okay. I need to know what animal you are, because I mean this show might be over as quickly as it starts. So I've got my notepad here. You guys can tell me what animal you are. I'm gonna make some notes, and we'll see if we can continue the podcast. Who wants to go first?
I'll let Jerk go.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here today. It's an honor to be able to sit down with somebody like yourself. If I had to, if I had to describe myself as an animal, I would say an elephant. An
elephant. Very interesting. Okay, elephant. Why elephant?
Well, I think for the obvious, comparisons in stature.
Okay.
But also the way that they're very calm and methodical when it comes to most things. But at the same time, they also have the ability to kind of ramp up the energy and be a little more. I don't know if I want to say aggressive, but be a little more assertive. I think that perfectly describes me.
Interesting. All right, we're getting some echo here. I'm not sure why that's happening. I will look into it. Mr. Kevin Lacey, I think you're on the team. I accept that answer. Kevin, go ahead.
All right. Well, Mr. Reed, as Hockey Jerk mentioned, it is great being on such a distinguished show such as Teal Tinted Glasses, and I'm happy to be on with you. Which side is Jerk on from me here? Is he on the left or the right?
He would be to your left. I think you guys are both
Am I
coming
looking the right
through.
Way?
Yeah, I think you guys are both coming through on Skype for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on here.
Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, it's great being on the show with you, Ian. Anyway, no, but so my animal, well, I think at the moment I should pick a unicorn because I am being blinded with sunlight and it's coming through very apparently on the feed right now. So a unicorn for all the light and craziness going on. I mean, if you really want me to do this, now you really can't see me here. So I am a fictitious being. So I'm a unicorn. What I was going to say was I was actually asked this question a long time ago for a job interview. It was kind of like a group thing, and then they picked the ones with the best answers. And I remember most people were like, I would be a dog because I'm friendly and likable. And I walked in there and I said, I'd be a wolf because I go in for the kill.
There you go.
So that's my answer right there. Still to this day, I would be a wolf.
Well, then you are definitely on the podcast. So for me, Jerk, can you talk just for a second? Let's make sure that you can still talk.
Yeah, really quick, I noticed in the chat, there's a few surprised listeners here. I think they thought you were going to say that you were most like a turtle, Kevin, for the turtleneck.
Wow. Because they've seen how I play hockey and it's slow and methodical.
Chat, let me know if everything's cool now, and I'm going to give my answer, and I'll see if you guys can still do the podcast with me. So for me, I would say at one point probably a honey badger. Because I just pick all the fights. Doesn't matter. Good fight, bad fight, doesn't matter. I pick all the fights and fight to the death. Now I'm more like a sloth. I'm just always hanging around, right? Like, you want to do a 40-minute show about Alex Stalock re-signing? Yeah, sure, Puck Guy, I'm here. I got it. I'm just hanging around, just always ready to go. So I think, yeah, that's what happened. I think I went from honey badger to sloth, and I don't know if that allows you guys to still do the pod with me, but I hope so. I don't know. I think it was a very honest answer.
Yeah, I think there would be some debate as to whether or not that is positive growth, but it's definitely growth, I think. Debatable on which direction, but
All right. According to Felix Chow, it is good now. And I look at it and put this thing up on the screen. Look at all this cool stuff we can do now. All right. Before we get into the Pittsburgh Penguins, before we get into like the bulk of the show, I'm just gonna give everyone kind of a rundown, because I think Teal Tinted Glasses, like, whatever we do, it changes all the time. Like, we always change it up every summer, and this summer is no different. So our goal this summer is to do probably ideally more shows, but not as long. So instead of like me writing 100 million different topics onto a sheet and being like, hey guys, this is the rundown, and then us being on for like 2.5 hours, we'd like to do less long shows, but like more condensed shows. So because what happened last year is a lot of times was we'd have like some really interesting meaty topics, but we were like, holy shit, we've already been here for 2 hours and we still got this to talk about.
When our podcasts are longer than the Sharks games, that's a problem.
Correct. So the goal this time is to kind of just pick, like, we might like hit some news and notes, and obviously you guys in the chat, we're always going to answer your questions and feedback. So we're definitely going to park some time at the end for answering any questions that you might have, but we're going to try and do like just one topic, bang it out, maybe like some quick Sharks news of the day. Obviously, are we going to talk about other teams all summer? No. I mean, once the Sharks actually do something worth talking about, we're going to do it. But
liked to have named a brand new GM here tonight for you and had some really great breaking news, but
right. Yeah. So, I mean, like, when Shark stuff happens, like, obviously we're going to cover it. So don't worry if you're not, if you've joined the Teal Town family in the last year and you're like, I don't know what Teal Tinted Glasses is. Well, no one knows. I don't know. These guys don't know. It changes every summer. So I hope you guys enjoy what we've prepared, and hope that you guys are excited going forward. But before we get super into the Pittsburgh Penguins, we did have a little tiny bit of Sharks news. The Sharks walked away from prospect Linus Oberg, 7th-round pick in 2020, which I think is going to be a hell of a draft class otherwise. Kevin, why is the franchise ruined?
My thoughts on Linus Oberg are pretty similar to how they were the day of the draft. Okay, that's fine. Now, granted, at the last prospects development camp that Oberg was participating in, he actually had some pretty good flashes of speed and creativity, especially when being outnumbered. He was not shy about jumping into the middle, which is something that I feel the Sharks definitely need more of. And hopefully they can address that with a higher round pick here in the upcoming draft than a former 7th who I don't know if it's a situation of he just wants to continue his career over in Sweden. He had a great year in the SHL, but maybe he sees brighter things over with another NHL club. The only thing is that for me, guys, and I know we're going to discuss this a lot here over the summer, is the Sharks need more scoring depth.
Yeah.
And so for, the opportunity is there. And for Oberg to not be willing to take that opportunity says to me that he's one of a dime a dozen Swedish European players who he got drafted and he's content playing in his native country, and that's fine.
Is that what this is?
But I don't think this ruins the franchise.
Is that what this is? So do you think this is more of a case of him just probably not wanting to come rather than the Sharks not being happy with what they drafted?
Absolutely, because I think he had 17 goals in the Swedish league, so that's well above the pace of a typical seventh round pick in an NHL draft. And the Sharks knew what they were getting when they drafted him too, because he had that hot start there. Since it was the late draft a couple of years ago, he had that hot start, getting significant playing time for his Swedish club, and so that they identified him as a goal scorer from the start, and he has been scoring goals in the SHL, especially in the second half. Because I think, if I recall, his first half scoring wasn't all that great, but when you look at his end season stats, they're very favorable again for a late round pick. But this is definitely not going to break the franchise. We've got more prospects coming in, and to try and make those who are upset about this, because there actually are folks who are upset about Uberg not signing with this team, I say we already got a player from the Swedish league for free.
Yeah.
Plus contract terms, of course. And his name is Strauss-Mann. Obviously, not the same position. He's a goaltender.
We need those two desperately.
We definitely do. So, oh no, we lost our 7th round pick to free agency or potentially a redraft. But we gained one with much more necessity, I guess, for this organization. So I'm fine with it.
Well, and I think, I think you made a good point, talking about how there is opportunity on the Sharks, especially as a scorer, to come in and to make an impact and hopefully stick around. And so immediately what comes to my mind is, you see, as you said, he's a pretty good goal scorer playing over in Sweden. It just makes you think maybe he looks at the Sharks and says, yeah, there's opportunity, but there's a bunch of guys ahead of me. And we've seen pretty much since the Sharks have been a bad team the last 3 years, where, there's a handful of guys that we've wanted to see more from and we've been interested in seeing, but it's like, no, we have to give this other potential depth forward a look first. And if I was a prospect in Sweden, I don't know that I would want to sign up for that. I think I would take my chances in a redraft, or, I would just sign with who I wanted when I felt good and ready to leave Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you guys said. I think if you look at how many players are jumping into the system this summer, or this fall rather, like even the Barracuda, you're going to be fighting for ice time on the Barracuda too. So I could definitely understand if you're happy where you are, not wanting to come over, and, are you a third line player on the Barracuda? Are you an every night player on the Barracuda at that point, where I think with how he played in Sweden, he probably has a better chance of being an every night player in the Swedish Elite League, which, I mean, it is still a very good league. Don't get me wrong. And I don't want to make I'm scoffing at that, because I hold the Swedish Elite League in very high regard.
Absolutely. Plus, Örebro, which is the team he plays for, was a top team in the Swedish league each of the last 2 seasons. So he's getting quality time playing for a top team in his home country. So to me, I don't know if we ever see Uberg come over, or maybe it's a situation. I mean, Carl Soderbergh, for example, player who was drafted by Boston a long time. I think it was Boston. Maybe no. St. Louis, I think, a long time ago. But he didn't come over till he was like 26, 27 years old, and that's when Boston acquired him. So for him, maybe he has an NHL future down the road. Maybe he does get redrafted. Maybe the Sharks redraft him. I mean, it's possible.
Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, but I mean, him being 21 years old already, he is technically eligible to be redrafted, but these things rarely ever happen. I just say best of luck in your future endeavors.
Yeah, all right, that sounds good. All right, so now let's get to the main topic at hand, and that would be what is next for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Because I think, when I look at teams and just who are just set up for fascinating off seasons, I mean, Pittsburgh's definitely high on that list. I think there's some other teams too that have some really fascinating decisions to make, where I don't know if they're going to look the same next year. So so we had to decide which team to talk about, and Jerk kind of held us both at gunpoint. I'm sorry, I didn't rat you out, Jerk. And he said, no, we're doing Pittsburgh. And we were like, okay, yeah, like, just, calm down, Jerk. It's fine. We'll do Pittsburgh. It's cool.
Allegedly my favorite team. Never been proven in a court of law. But
yeah, and obviously, obviously, looking before we go, I just want to thank everyone for joining us right now. I know that it's not going to do amazing numbers like Pittsburgh. What the fuck? It's Teal Town USA. What's wrong with you guys? But we're Teal Tinted Glasses. We do whatever the hell we want. So let me give you a rundown of the what the Pittsburgh Penguins are looking at heading into this free agency period. They're pending UFAs, some pretty big names here. The biggest one, obviously, would probably be Evgeny Malkin, 35 years old, just coming off a $9.5 million deal. Center left wing, Brian Boyle, 37, also basically league minimum, $750K. I'm sure if he wants to stick around, he probably stays on that. Rickard Rakell, obviously acquired from Anaheim, 29, coming off a $3.789 million contract. Evan Rodriguez, $28 million. The other big name, obviously, is Chris Letang, $7.25 million contract he's coming off of, also 35 years old. Nathan Beaulieu, left defense, right defense, 29 years old, $2.4 million. Casey DeSmith, 30 years old, $1.25 million, and Louis Domingue, also 30 years old, coming off contract where he was making $750K. Obviously, when you look at those lists, obviously there's two big ones that stand out. I mean, guys that have been there through all the good and all the bad, and Evgeny Malkin. I mean, Evgeny Malkin still got it. Evgeny Malkin played only 41 games this year, so obviously injuries are a little bit of a concern with Malkin, but still 20 goals, 22 assists, 42 points, 35. It's pretty good to me.
I think with Malkin, it's going to be up to him, right? I don't think you'll hear Pittsburgh say, "Oh, we're ready to move on and look forward." I think as much as a lot of people were concerned with the low ball offer, or the alleged low ball offer that came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, tell us just for the class, what was the that low ball offer? That is alleged.
Yeah, Yes, the alleged lowball offer. It was a 3-year deal for Malkin and Letang, which I think on that side of things, I kind of think that's fine, because that's around where Crosby's deal is. I believe Crosby's got 3 years left, so maybe it makes sense for them to have everybody expire at the same time. But I want to say it was 5 million a year, 7 million a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I do think, truthfully, I think somewhere closer to 7-8 million is probably where they want Malkin to end up. I mean, he, as you said, he played well this year. He was a very effective role for them. He's still a really good player. I would argue he's still an elite player, but it's just the nature of the beast. You get older and you start to get to the end of your career. You need to make room for other guys, and it makes sense that you would see a little bit of a discount. But like I said, I think it's up to him. I think he's going to say, yes, I'm staying, this is what I want, and it's going to happen. Or I think he's saying, no, I'm going, and Pittsburgh will have to figure it out. I don't think you'll see Pittsburgh walk away from him.
I think this is a matter of Evgeny Malkin deciding whether he wants that big payday, that one last big payday at 35 years old, or whether he's happy in the situation that he's been in. You look at Brian Rust re-signing a couple of weeks ago for a little over $5 million, which I think is an absolute bargain for Pittsburgh. And that contract right there gives the Penguins the room to be able to re-sign Evgeny Malkin, even if it's for a little bit more than what they hope it to be. I'm with you, Jerk. I think it should be somewhere in the $8 to $9 million ballpark. You look at Sidney Crosby's contract; he's still up for another 3 years at 8.7, which for what Crosby gives him is fantastic. A fantastic deal. And when Crosby's deal does come to expire in 3 years, he's going to be 37 years old. So he's probably not going to be commanding any more than what he's currently making. I can't imagine. Who knows? Joe Pavelski is that exception, I think, there. But and there's your Joe Pavelski reference, everybody. We had to get one in, right? But yeah, I think if getting to Malkin, it really does come to whether he wants to get paid. And the other thing is that he does have that injury history. So he probably would get paid by a bunch of other teams out there. But at the same time, you're probably going to see a few teams who are doing the buyer beware situation because of Malkin's history and injury history. He only played, 41 games, I think, this season. But games, a point per game player, those don't fall from trees. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the thing with Malkin, right, is like I think that what I would be more concerned with is a team that would, if he decides to try free agency, and I'm not convinced he does, but if he does, I think for me, I would be more worried about the team that brings him in as the centerpiece.
Yeah.
Right? I think that would be my concern. I think that would be. And again, I don't think he tests free agency, but if he did, I would be worried about a team bringing him as like the centerpiece of their offense, because I think that at this point is a fool's errand.
Can I jump in real quick
Absolutely.
on that? Look at the Edmonton Oilers right now. Yes, they are down 3-0 in their series with Colorado because it's freaking Colorado, and it's freaking Edmonton too. But look at Edmonton here with McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, they have been able to prove that if you get a couple of guys and a decent third player like Vander Kane when he's not being suspended, you can make a deep run. And Pittsburgh's got that with Crosby. If they can bring Malkin back, there's their two-headed monster again. And then they've got Gensel right there, who was their leading scorer this season as their so-called third best player.
Yeah, Jake Gensel's the guy who doesn't, for me, doesn't get nearly enough love because of the shadow that he unfortunately stands in. Because I think I'd love to do like this summer at some point. We've got a lot of different show ideas, but I'd love to do a show on just guys that are just completely underrated. I don't know if it's fair to call Jake Gensel underrated, but I think just because of the shadow that he has to kind of sit in with, obviously Crosby, Malkin being there, I don't think Jake Gensel gets nearly enough love.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I agree, and it's because of Crosby and Malkin there, right? Where you tend to overlook the players that are there, the supporting cast. Like I'll be totally honest, it had temporarily like blipped from my mind that Jason Zucker was on this team.
Yeah.
And is that a product of his play declining? I would say, yeah, sure, probably. But you always kind of think it's the Crosby and Malkin show, and then they sort of fill the rest of the deck chairs as the opportunities come. And I think, like, with Malkin, again, he's not like he has to compete with anybody, right? Like, if he does re-sign, like it's not like he's the old guy being pushed out, and he's going to have to fight for it, similar to when the Sharks brought back Patrick Marleau. It's that second line center position, top line power play, like it's his, right?
Absolutely.
And it's essentially his to give away. And so I think as with most players, you look at a player's age and you see it start with the number 3 and you get a little nervous. But I think somebody like Malkin, even though I do agree the injuries he's had has slowed him down a bit, I still think, as I said earlier, he's still at too high of an elite level to just say, thanks, but we're good.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I don't want to do this because like I'm not the guy that does this, but I think it's funny because when you look back at these deals, right? And I think, we mentioned Joe Pavelski earlier, which I think, I think Malkin's obviously a better player than Joe Pavelski, but I mean, it's a similar thing, right? Where it's like, you can't just because a player gets over 35. Now, obviously a lot of them do drop off, and do I expect Malkin to drop off a little bit? Probably. I mean, Father Time catches us all, but
probably more so because of the injuries than
correct.
his age.
Yeah. So I mean, like with Malkin there, like I think Malkin is the type of player where you roll the dice and say, yeah, I'm saying he's not going to age the way like some of these aging curves have turned out, right? Because we saw, I mean, we brought up Patrick Marleau earlier, coming back to the Sharks. I mean, he was a shell of what he used to be in his last stint in San Jose, like an absolute shell. But that's not every player, right? Now,
go ahead. What if? Okay, so let's say the Penguins do bring back Evgeny Namalkin. And I almost said Sharks instead of Penguins too. So, let's say they bring him back. Maybe it's for $8.5 million. If the Penguins bring back Chris Letang too at maybe $7 million, that's only going to leave them about $7 million to fill all the other roster spots that they have.
Yeah.
So with Gensel, Rust, Crosby, etc., do you think it's an either or thing with these guys? Do you think the Penguins can re-sign both? Because I don't.
I think they have to.
Like, if they don't, yeah. But.
Like if they don't get one, they might as well say goodbye to the other, right? Because just from an optics perspective, right? Like sure. it doesn't make much sense to say, yeah, okay, we made it work with one but not the other, when you could make an argument that they're equally as important to the franchise. I think I'm kind of the belief in this situation, you get them signed to whatever makes it happen, right? And Kevin obviously pointing out that if they do sign in those ranges that he mentioned, you're looking at maybe $7-ish million in cap space after it's all said and done. And so, yeah, it's obviously going to be tough to figure out. You need to get Kasperi Kapanen re-signed. I'm assuming they would want to get Danton Heinen re-signed. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't. He got pretty close to a career year playing with Pittsburgh, but there's other guys as well. I mean, Evan Rodriguez was a guy they took a chance on, and he ended up working out very well for them, especially this year. And I think you can expect his production to dip considerably from what he did this year, but that doesn't mean he's not a useful player. And if the Penguins do decide to run it back, which I think they will, they'll need a guy like Evan Rodriguez. And so maybe that puts them in a situation where, maybe they need to find somewhere else for Jason Zucker to go. Maybe they need to find somewhere else for a John Marino or a Mike Matheson to go. You know what I mean? Just, I feel like the smart play here is you do run it back. You bring Malkin back. You bring Letang back. But, there is going to be like some work associated with it. And as much as that work might be challenging for the Penguins to make it all happen, I still think that's where they need to go.
Yeah, and just because Dirk brought up Heinen and Kapanen here, I'll give you the rest of the picture, because I kind of gave you the start of the picture with the unrestricted free agents. So the pending RFAs, now both these guys do have arbitration rights. Dirk mentioned Danton Heinen, winger, 26 years old, makes $1.1 million, and Kasperi Kapanen, 25, makes $3.2 million. They do have about $2 million of dead cap space for Jack Johnson this season. That will drop off over the next 3 years, going down to less than $1 million. So their total cap dollars for this team right now, as currently constructed, is $59.291 million, which leaves about $23.208 million in cap space. The draft this year, and we'll get into their prospects and stuff in a minute, but just their draft picks this year, to just paint the entire picture here, they have their first, their fourth, their fifth, their sixth, and their seventh round pick entering the 2022 draft. So going back to the conversation, though, obviously about running it back, this team, now with the whole picture, we know, like, obviously, I think Malkin's going to come back in. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be cheap, right? Like, I don't think Evgeny Malkin's signing for, I would say less than $6 million.
No.
Right?
I almost wonder, granted, different situation because of the obvious records that are involved, but I almost wonder if Malkin kind of points at the Ovechkin deal and says, hey, we're from the same draft class. We're from the same country. We're both elite players. Maybe make that happen. And
that's a good pull.
Whether or not that's the right idea, I mean, who's to say? But I could certainly see it. And for those who don't know, that Ovechkin deal, when it was signed, It was a 4-year deal at a 5-year deal, just over $9 million, $9.5 million. So I think that would be a bit rich for Malkin, but not much lower, I don't think.
Yeah, because the difference is that Russian machine does break.
Right. And has before. Including this year.
Chris Letang's another interesting one, though, because, like, I know Chris Letang's good, right? But when I looked at the numbers, like, I'm not going to lie, my jaw hit the floor a little bit. 78 games played, 10 goals, 58 assists. Now, obviously, when you have guys like Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel, and when you have forwards to finish, it's easy to rack up assists as a defenseman, as we know. But I was still kind of surprised. 68-point season, in 78 games. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. Playoffs, not the greatest playoffs for Chris Letang, I don't think. 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points, -3. I mean, obviously, plus minus not a great stat, but I think this team defensively needs a little bit of help. I think that'd be fair to say.
Pittsburgh's got kind of the any man's defense, really. Kind of like the Winnipeg Jets, except for that the Penguins' defense actually led their team to the playoffs. Brian Dumoulin, I think, is fantastic. I think he's a fantastic defensive defenseman. But he's going to be coming up on a contract year this next year. And as Jerk mentioned, Marino's getting a good contract, but I think for the value he brings, it's good. Matheson had the best year he's had in four seasons, but he's still making quite a bit for what right now is one good season with the Penguins. Marcus Patterson, kind of the same thing. Marcus Patterson is, I think, an underrated defenseman, but I don't know if he's a $4.5 million defenseman, or $4 million. Sorry. So that's why you get guys like Chad Ruedel and Mark Friedman, who I think are both serviceable, and they're kind of like the quad A defenseman, the way Lane Peterson is our quad A forward for the Sharks. But Letang really is the straw that stirs the drink here, and this one, I don't know about you guys, I would be more concerned about Letang's injury history, given that it's mostly head injuries, than Malkin's injury history, if I'm a team who's on the outside looking at someone to acquire. But then again, there's the draw of that right shot offensive defenseman, veteran defenseman, who's won Stanley Cups and can bring in leadership. In the room, baby. Yeah, exactly. So Chris Letang, I think, might be the more interesting free agent, at least for me. And as I mentioned, if the Penguins bring back Malkin, where does that leave Letang? But I love your point, Jerk, about sign both or sign neither.
So, and I've had a little more time to chew on it, and I still think it is the right play to run it back and bring them both back. But you look at Chris Letang, you look at kind of what the numbers tell you, and I'm curious to know if you guys think this. And I know, Kevin, you said it a couple minutes ago. Does the thought of buyer beware pop up at all when you look at Christopher Letang having a career high in points at 35? Because I look at that and I'm like, how much better can you get at 35?
It's true.
And I think you could make the same argument for Malkin, where, okay, well, maybe Malkin just goes down from here and it blows up on him. And yeah, maybe, but I think, I don't know. I think in this situation, I would value the elite forward over the elite defenseman, and maybe I would honestly try and rebuild that entire blue line. But I do wonder, even though I think it is the right play to bring Letang back, I do wonder if, like, that 68-point year he had this year, I wonder if that's as good as it gets. And then, however many years he signs, 2, 3, 4, like, Penguins fans are left wanting more from him.
If the Penguins do bring back Chris Letang, though, you're right. They need to rebuild the defense. I think they need to rebuild at least half the defense anyway. But if they bring back Chris Letang, they have to bring in someone to help with the load, because Chris Letang played almost 26 minutes on average this season. Now, he put up a ton of points and deserved that 26 minutes, but look at what's gone on with Brent Burns here, where a big defenseman versus small defenseman, but Brent Burns doesn't look like the same player when he's playing 28, 29 minutes a night than he is when he's playing 23, 24 minutes a night. I would take the 23, 24 minutes because he's older. He's, got his defensive inconsistencies. Letang, I think, is a better defensive defenseman than Burns is, but still, I would like to see. You mentioned he was -3 in the playoffs against some team, and they're going to have to either give more minutes to John Marino or find someone else in the market to.
That's the exact point that I was going to make. I mean, you look at like, no, but I'm glad you said it, because you look at Marino, look what Marino did as a rookie, 26 points in 56 games. He got some Calder votes. He was playing, around the same time per game that has played the last 2 years, but made a positive impact on the team. And the 2 years since, it's been decent. I think this year was a rebound from 2 years ago, but I feel like, to me, the smartest option for helping take the load off of Letang would be to give some of that ice time to Marino and kind of cross your fingers and say a prayer that he can build on what he did his rookie year. Because his rookie year, I mean, Kevin knows he was a pretty highly talked about player in some social circles that we share. And I kind of feel like that's the big key, right? Is, okay, say you scale Letang down from 26 to 22, 23. Can you get Marino up to 23? And he's not Chris Letang, but can you get more than 25 points in a full 82 game season?
So here's a couple things I want to touch on here, because I think you guys make some incredibly great points. I think Burns, I wonder how many points Burns would put up if he had forwards that could finish. Same with Carlson, for that matter.
I feel like that's been
easy.
That's been the problem.
I think for Chris Letang, as long as he has guys like Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel and Rust, and you know what I mean? As long as those guys are up there, I feel like his points are going to come.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Evan Rodriguez and Danton Heinen with career years. Great year for Danton Heinen to have arbitration rights.
Doesn't it always work out?
Part of that is what's that?
Doesn't it always work that way?
Yeah, but part of that is you got a guy like Letang feeding him. Obviously, the forwards as well, but that just provides more evidence that the Penguins need Letang.
Yeah, I want to get some comments in the chat here quick. I'm going to go out of order a little bit, so bear with me. Jim in Florida saying that, if not for the Trouba elbow to Raquel and Crosby's head, the Penguins would be playing Tampa right now. I don't know if I buy that. I think the Rangers for sure had no answer for Crosby's line. So I think did that have an impact on the series? Probably. Do the Penguins coast through the next round? I'm not sure. And then Ricky's saying here, with Letang, obviously, is skating still there? You're just betting that, obviously betting him not to lose that step, because I think obviously if Letang skating did drop off, I think that would be a little bit problematic for him. And that's obviously as the age gets closer to 40, those are the kind of things you start worrying about. And then I want to go to Luke Johnson here, because it kind of segues nicely into some of where I kind of want to go next with this. Obviously,
Luke Johnson from the Minnesota Wilds watching our show? That's awesome.
He's saying, I live with a Pens fan. He's down for the rebuild. He saw what I went through with the Sharks the last few years, and he does not want that. Well, if you rebuild, that's kind of where you go. And then he just finished up saying, obviously he wants a rebound. He thinks they should let Malkin and Letang go unless it's for a team-friendly deal. And here's the thing, right? Obviously, it's hockey. Results matter, as we all know. And this is a team that hasn't seen the second round in 5 years. They got swept by the Islanders in 18-19. They got beaten by the Montreal Canadiens in the qualifying round of the bubble in 2019-20. They got bounced 2-4 again by the Islanders in 2021. And then obviously this year lost in 7 to the Rangers. Now, regular season output for the most of those has been pretty good. Like they're still competitive, but obviously in the playoffs, like, and this group, credit to them. I mean, the guys we're talking about, they're all multi-time cup champions, but results matter. I mean, how much do you think their results in the playoffs, like, because obviously, like, we've all said kind of run it back, right? But does it make sense to run it back with kind of the way things have gone? Like, I look at this team and I don't feel like, oh, they're just, they're going to be like, I don't think there's a Tampa Bay Lightning run coming from them.
I think it makes sense to run it back only because, I mean, this is the easy answer, so I'll say it first and then say something else. But you have Sidney Crosby for 3 more years.
Yeah.
Like, the type of player Crosby is,
2
like,
more.
If you really want to get wild and do the rebuild, you trade Crosby, which that's like, to me, that's galaxy brain stuff.
Yeah.
But so I think based on that, and you look like you have Jake Gensel. Granted, Gensel's only 27, but you've got him for 2 years. You just signed Brian Rust to 6 years. Mm-hmm. You just signed 37-year-old Jeff Carter just signed an extension.
I know.
Right? Like, yeah. The Penguins have put the pieces in place to run it back. Now, all that said, I think my personal favorite in terms of building a team, and the Chicago Blackhawks were really famous for this when they won their cups, was identifying your core group of guys, whether that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys, and then every year, every 2 years, kind of rebuild, in air quotes, rebuild the bottom 6, rebuild the bottom pair, rebuild the middle pair, or your backup goalie. And I wonder, like, I think that's kind of what Pittsburgh needs to do. Like, they have their horses at forward, Crosby, Gensel, Rust, Carter, like, those are their big guys at forward. I said it, I'll say it again, Jason Zucker, to me, he's the one that's got to go. And so maybe and honestly, I don't think many Penguins fans would be too upset if Kasperi Kapanen went either. I mean, Pittsburgh gave up 15th overall for him 2 years ago, and the best he's been able to do is 32 points, and that was this year. I wonder if Kasperi Kapanen needs to go, and they've done a good job. Obviously, they identified Gensel and they've put him in a position to succeed. Same as Rust. I feel like they kind of need one more player similar to that, and because this is Teal Tinted Glasses, and how does this affect the Sharks? Right. Somebody similar to an Alexander Barabanov, where not a lot of people are talking about him, and so you pluck him from seemingly out of nowhere and put them in a position to make it work. And you could make the argument that that's what they did with Rust. I mean, Rust was a call-up when Pittsburgh beat San Jose in 2016. Gensel was a call-up when they beat Nashville in 2017. So I think we've seen over these last 5 years, as you mentioned, Ian, the guys who are a level before the core, they're not getting it done. I would say they need, at least 5 brand new forwards for this team. And kind of like Kevin mentioned earlier, I think Marino is solid. I think Dumoulin is solid. Obviously, you bring Letang back, but Mike Matheson, you take him or leave him. Same with Marcus Patterson. And I think that's going to be a thing as well. You kind of the bottom 6, maybe the bottom pair, maybe the bottom 2 pairs, and then you have to decide, okay, is Jari our guy? Yeah. Are they bringing back Casey DeSmith? Are they going to bring back Spicy Pork? I don't know. But, there's a lot of questions that they need to figure out, but it's all in terms of sort of that second level, the support guys.
And just before, give me 1 second, Kevin. I just want in the chat, I just want to address the chat here for a second, because obviously it's obviously they won 2 cups. You win back-to-back cups, you're allowed to. And I'm agreeing. I'm not saying that. I am saying, well, no, they have to get back into. But I mean, obviously, for the topic of for at hand, it's how do you get this team back into that Stanley Cup final? How do you get that team back to winning Stanley Cups? Because I think winning cups is great, man. But what's better than winning cups? Winning more cups. And
I was gonna say, back-to-back cups is cool, but how cool would a third cup in the last 6 years be?
Yeah, Ricky, I'll get that question at the end of the show. Yeah, so go ahead, Kevin, because I cut you off.
Yeah, where was? If I'll put a shark spin on it. I'm talking about depth, guys. Jason Zucker right now, been a bit injury prone here the last year and a half, and his production has significantly suffered because of that. If Kevin LeBanc made $1 million less than what he does, I wonder if the Penguins would come sniffing around him.
I'll do you one better. I think at his current contract, the Penguins would sniff around that.
All right, there you go.
I mean, that's a really smart idea, Kevin. I like that.
Yeah. But that's where I was going with that. Backup goalie real quick, because you mentioned Casey DeSmith. I'm curious to see what happens there. Casey DeSmith had a fantastic year as the backup goalie behind Tristan Jarry, and then got hurt at the absolute worst time, but as did everyone else on Pittsburgh, for that matter, not named Jason Zucker. But I'm curious to see a bunch of these Penguins. It's kind of, I guess, my final thought on the Penguins here. A bunch of these Penguins are in a good situation where they're at. Danton Heinen, Evan Rodriguez, Casey DeSmith, and Heinen's an RFA. I don't know about Rickard Rakell, just because Rakell was there for a cup of coffee. But you've got these so-called lesser guys, the depth guys, who are bringing in big-time value for the team. Wouldn't you, if you're one of those guys having a career year, want to keep that culture, keep that prosperity going, and try and, I know sometimes, like I said with Malkin, you get greedy. And I always bring up Martin Lapointe as one of the biggest free agency busts of all time, because he decided, I'd rather get paid in Boston than win in Detroit. Yep. And his career never was the same after that. So if I was a Pittsburgh Penguin, I would like to stick around, especially those type of depth guys, and because I don't think they get replaced after just a year here.
Let me ask you a question. So if the Penguins, if they can, and I when you say you're talking about Jason Zucker being hurt, obviously that is going to factor into the dip in offense, and I like Jason Zucker. I think he's a good player, but
I do too.
But I think when you are in that position of trying to win a cup, and I know the Golden Knights brass has gotten a lot of flack for it, but when you are in that position, you do need to be proactive and aggressive in trying to make tweaks that could potentially make you better.
Sure.
And so my question is, if the Penguins can find a way to I don't want to say get rid of, but if they can find a way to move on from Jason Zucker and maybe free up that money, do you think that somebody like Rickard Rakell, who, if you do a little bit of a dive into the numbers, the 19 games in the regular season that Rakell played for Pittsburgh, that was, from a statistical output, the best hockey that he's played since 2018.
Yeah.
And do you think it would make sense, if they can find a way to move on from Jason Zucker, to just, in the theme of running it back, just say, hey, Rakell, we really liked you here. Why don't you stay?
They gave a lot up to get Rakell, too. They had two really, good goalie prospects, and they sent one of them to Anaheim in that trade.
And I've always been a fan of Rakell, and I feel like, similar to Zucker, Kevin, I think he's been beat up a lot by the injuries the last couple years, but I've always thought that he's a guy, he played with Getzlaf, he played with Henrique, and then obviously in Pittsburgh, he spent a lot of time with Evgeny Malkin. So obviously he can play with elite players. But I wonder, somebody like that who can play with an elite center and can be flexible, left wing, right wing, even played some center early in his career. I wonder if somebody who's flexible like that and adaptive would be a really good fit for a Penguins team trying to run it back.
If you're the Penguins, you have to use Jake Gensel and Brian Rust as the example, because obviously they're doing great things for the Penguins and have for a long time. But at the same time, can either of you look in the mirror and say Jake Gensel and Brian Rust are going to put up the same kind of production on other teams? Because I would not be able to say that.
Fair point.
Jake Gensel had 40 goals this season. I could see him as a 30-goal scorer on the another team. But that's still a 10-goal drop. Yeah. That's pretty significant. So to me, you look at Rickard Rakell and say, you're in a similar vein as a Jake Gensel and a Brian Rust. Look what kind of production you can put up with the guys that we have on this roster. Please stay. I think Rakell would like that, because Rickard Rakell obviously has been was on a struggling Ducks team for a number of years now. And now that he's in a winning culture again, which is what, every player strives to be in, why would you leave? That's my bottom line about the whole thing is why would you leave? I have one more thought, but do you guys want to touch up on that?
I think ultimately this is going to come down to, what does 87 want? Right? Yeah, ultimately, I feel like Crosby's gonna be the one that decides I can't see Hextall just being like, no, you know what, Sidney, just shut up, I got this. I feel like Crosby's probably gonna have a lot of say on what's left. And look at Crosby, what, 34 now? I mean, he's got less miles in front of him than he has behind him as well, or less behind, you know what I mean? Yeah, less in front of him, more behind him. Terrible analogy. But anyway, so I feel like, obviously, I think they're going to have a say there. And you know what? And the more I think about this, I am on team run it back. Because, again, I'm not a huge Tristan Jarry guy, but Tristan Jarry probably makes a difference in that series that they were in. Just for that reason alone, just some of the injuries that they had at the worst possible time, I feel like you run it back. I think my concern would be that at some point you have to start looking forward, because I'm just going to finish up the whole picture at this point.
That's where I was going to go with my last point. Yeah.
So obviously I told you what they have for picks. I mean, they still have a pretty decent selection of draft picks, no second, no third, but I mean, again, it's fine. Entering 2022, Scott Wheeler usually ranks on The Athletic, usually ranks all the prospect pools. Now, obviously, this is one dude's opinion, so you can yell at me and say, no, that's garbage, whatever. It's just, it was the most easily accessible thing that I found. And this is a team, again, one person's opinion, with the 29th ranked prospect pool in the NHL. Now, again, when you win 2 cups and you're trying to keep the party going, this is what happens. But, as you guys mentioned earlier, they've been able to backfill with guys in the system, and they've got some prospects, man. I was going through their prospects. I think the prospects that I think could definitely make a difference, one, as soon as next year. I think Sam Poulin could come in next year and be unreal for them on the cheap. And then they have Joel Blomqvist over in Karpat in the Liga, and this dude, oh my goodness, the season he had. So he plays 20 games, has a goals against average of 132 and a save percentage of 940. But it gets better. They go into the playoffs, first round. First game, they're getting shelled by, what is the Temper? What is, Kevin, help me here. What's the city's name? It's ILVES.
The Tampere is the city, Tappara is the team.
So they're getting shelled. So in game 1, he goes in relief of Stanislav Gilimov, and he only allows 1 goal. The rest of the series goes 7 games, which were all decided by 1 goal, a couple overtime games, including, I believe, game 7. They did lose the series, but his numbers for this 7-game run, a 1.10 goals against average and a 950 save percentage. So, like, goaltending, they're going to be set. It's just an issue of, getting him, obviously, I think, over to North America, getting him playing on Wilkes-Barre, and going from there.
Even his one appearance in Wilkes-Barre, I mean, it was a loss, but again, an impressive showing, a 926 save percentage. I mean, the way I've always tried to grade goalies is okay, how many leagues have you played in, and have you played well in every single league? Yeah. And so far, that's kind of what you've seen with a Joel Blomqvist. And so he's obviously not signed right now, but I do wonder if you are uncertain, if you're the Penguins, you're not, I think DeSmith is gone. I don't think they're bringing back Louis Domingue, as much as it would be awesome for the memes. Mm-hmm. Like, then you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, Tristan Jarry, are we going to, next year as a 28-year-old, are we going to sign him to a 6-year deal? And, I mean, I would be extremely cautious about doing that.
And I think Tristan, I'm not a big Tristan Jarry guy, but his numbers aren't terrible.
Yeah.
No, he's decent.
No, yeah.
He's an NHL goalie. Yeah. Which you'd be surprised, but there are a lot of guys who have the job that can't do it.
Oh, we know.
I think one thing that the Penguins do have going for them is, yes, they do have the 29th ranked prospect pool, but if they do end up losing a couple of the depth guys that I mentioned due to free agency, they at least have a couple of players who could fill in. Plus, of course, free agency is usually littered with those types of players anyway. But I completely forgot that Alex Nylander was in the Pittsburgh organization now. Yeah, I forgot that was a thing. So, I mean, he's got NHL experience. You could call him up. Valtteri Puustinen, who is a pretty small forward by NHL standards. So he looks to be the next one to jump up, though. And I know him and Philip Hollander had a cup of coffee with the team. I think you're dead on with Sam Poulin. That's kind of the player the Penguins are relying on to take a step forward, as well as on the back end, Pierre-Olivier Joseph. So the Penguins don't have a lot to offer, but they have enough that they can bring up from the minors and help them continue on their path to try and get another cup run
and
going.
They've always seemed to draft well, so I feel like even if they're picking later on, I don't know. I think if I'm the Penguins, you're going for it, but I don't know how much draft capital I'm spending going forward.
That's, I think, when you consider, as you said, Ian, 2 cups is awesome, but how much would you like 3 cups? You've seen picks thrown overboard left, right, and center. I mean, like I said, they gave up 15th overall for Kasperi Kapanen, and they gave up a first-round pick for Derek Brassard, which blew up on them. And there's a lot of draft picks have been shown the door in this time that they've tried to remain competitive. And so I do agree. I think similar to, you can argue whether or not the Sharks are doing this, but the Sharks are claiming to want to be competitive while not really spending a lot of draft capital on trading. And I wonder if that's where the mindset shifts, where, we're only going to make a deal if it makes sense. And I think, going back to the Rickard Rakell, obviously they gave up a second-round pick, among other things. I wonder if that is a situation where it does make sense, where they know they don't have a lot of picks. I mean, Brian Burke went on the radio and said, we don't have picks, and then traded one. But I look at that and I say, okay, I don't know that he would have traded a pick unless he felt pretty good that he could keep him.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know. But again, in the theme, this is Teal Tinted Glasses, in the theme of how does this affect the Sharks, in the theme of here's your regularly scheduled nightmare. I don't know if you guys recall this at all, but I've done a lot of we'll call it bitching and moaning on Twitter about
were you mad online?
Yes. about how I could see the Sharks not send a QO to Jonathan Dahlen.
Oh yeah.
And so now I'm thinking, imagine a player like Jonathan Dahlen goes to Pittsburgh. You put him with Malkin. What kind of nightmare fuel would that be?
That would be, but that's the type of player the Penguins are probably looking for. So
right. Somebody who, like I said with Barabanov earlier, not on the radar.
Not to jump around, but would you guys qualify both Kapanen and Heinonen, or would you play roulette there a little bit since they both have arbitration rights?
Wow, Heinen, I think I would. I'm curious I don't see him, even though he does have the arbor rights, I don't see him asking for a ton more than what he's got, because hasn't proven it over his career up until this year. Kapanen, I love Kasperi Kapanen, but I would absolutely let him walk.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think with Heinen, his career high was his rookie year, and he hasn't gotten back to that. He did get close this year. He was about 14 points off this year. But I'm with Kevin. I think you roll the dice on a Danton Heinen in sending him the QO. I don't think the arbitration would be too problematic for them. With Kapanen, I think it would be a mistake for Brian Burke to just not tender him the QO and walk away. That said, I could see Brian Burke and Ron Hextall do that.
Yeah. I think we're going to see it a lot this summer of guys not getting QOs.
I think we saw it more in 2020 with the uncertainty of the pandemic, where obviously there's some uncertainty now, but I think things are a bit clearer. You know, there is a tentative plan for the salary cap, and I think teams might be a bit less excited about letting RFAs go. But with Kasperi Kapanen, as I said, they gave up 15th overall for him, and the best he did was 32 points. And I don't know. I do agree with Kevin. I think you move on from him. I don't know if you let him walk. You know, maybe that's a situation you trade him and see what you can get. Maybe you trade him for another RFA winger who has kind of struggled to meet expectations.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you trade him for, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I feel as though there is a guy. I feel like every team in the league has a guy that's on another team that would be like the perfect fit for them. You know.
Sure.
And I see Pittsburgh, the way that they operate, even with the GM change. I don't see them quitting until they're dead. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna keep going for it until Crosby and the company say that's it.
If Raquel doesn't re-sign, I wonder if the Penguins entertain the thought of packaging Kapanen with a first to get a guy that is more suitable for them.
Kevin Fiala.
But running into the danger of trading your draft picks, and this kind of goes back to what Luke Johnson mentioned in the chat earlier, and Rob Iman is talking about in the chat about how the window is still closing for Pittsburgh, despite the fact that they're still poised to contend here in the short term. But look at the Sharks. The Sharks pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and eventually the wheels do lock up. And with Pittsburgh, 29th ranked prospect pool, have some guys in the short term who can be call up, but really no long-term aspirations. You run into a scary territory when you keep trading your draft picks. Like Pittsburgh needs to try and retain some of these picks rather than just, you know, and hope that they luck out in free agency, I think, more than anything. Or make quality trades, because
bleak
otherwise, but Pittsburgh is going to be in a real rough situation 4 or 5 years down the line if they have nothing to show for it and have no picks coming in at that point.
I think we've spent a lot of time talking about how, you know, the backfill method seems to be the best method for the Pittsburgh Penguins going forward, and Raquel obviously being the number one contender for that spot. But I wonder, you know, Kevin, you said, what if you do Kasperi Kapanen in a draft pick, whether that's a first or something else? Obviously, I think it would start with the first. But there as sexy as the backfill option is for Pittsburgh because it's worked for them. I look over at the Minnesota Wild, and there's an unsigned Kevin Fiala who
started to say that
who Minnesota probably won't be able to afford, and I think Minnesota would love a first round pick. Who wouldn't? But I think Minnesota would feel better about signing Kasperi Kapanen than they would Kevin Fiala.
Okay.
Yeah, but then how's Pittsburgh gonna be able to sign Kevin Fiala? That's
the thing. For Pittsburgh, the way they're built and what they need to do, a lot of these moves have to be done in tandem.
Yeah.
All right. So, I think we've kind of figured everything out. So I'm going to go around final verdict. I think we all agree. I think the final verdict is run it back.
Run it back.
I think for me, what I would do though is I think the second this thing looks like it's even going off the rails a little bit, because again, like I said, if you look at the playoff results aren't there, but this has still been, in full seasons, this has still been a 100-point team. I think if that significantly drops off, then I think it's probably you hit the emergency brake and you start tossing everything that's not going to float overboard.
I like that, Ian. I think that kind of the best case situation for the Penguins. Either they are just as good as they were this year or better, or they completely fall off and then they start moving out assets, because this team doesn't have the long-term future to afford any gray area now.
It's winner. It's win. I don't like win at all costs, because I don't think that this team should be. Unless it's the perfect trade, I don't think they should just be willy-nilly just throwing away draft capital for rentals at this point, right?
Right.
I feel like you have to I feel like this is a team that has to be good enough to get there with the girl you brought. That's the way I look at this team. Jerk, any final verdicts on this?
No, I'm with you. I think you run it back, and I think. You hear run it back and you think, okay, it's the same exact team, we're just trying again and hopefully we get a better roll of dice. But I think it's at least when I say run it back, I'm thinking kind of like what I said earlier, with that established core, those guys who are signed up, you're Crosby,
you're bringing back
Gensel,
Crosby, you're bringing
Rust,
back Malkin, you're bringing back Letang,
Jeff Carter, Malkin, that kind of thing, which Jeff Carter, part of the established core, largely based on his contract, but he played well for them. And and then you kind of rebuild around the edges, and we talked about a lot of good options too, whether you bring in a Raquel, you throw Kapanen overboard, you go after Kevin Fiala, you go after Kevin LeBanc, you go after Kevin Lacey, you go after any Kevin in the league. And I think if there's one thing, and I'm willing to put my stamp on this, if there's one thing, I think the Penguins will acquire somebody named Kevin this summer. We'll see. But I'm team run it back like you are, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and it has to happen in tandem. And they don't need to be aggressive and throw away picks, but they definitely need to be proactive.
I don't know if the Penguins are going to be paying $750,000 for a 38-year-old defenseman. Although I am a right shot, so got that going for me.
Kevin Lacey, Mike Matheson. I think I would take you.
Wow! All right, that's high praise. I'll take that.
We'll just give you his cap hit, and we'll call it a day.
I'm gonna put that on my Twitter. What I was also laughing about was Ricky in the chat said trade everyone for 2020. Talking about the Sharks, trade everyone for 2023 first. And I was thinking, going to what I said earlier, maybe the Sharks can get a first for Kevin LeBanc, and then you hope Pittsburgh completely falls off the rails and that becomes a first overall pick. So
there you go.
That's the dream.
Ricky had another question in the chat too before we get out of here. And I feel like I know the answer to this, but it's hey guys, can you answer a question for me? If Gannon goes back to the junior, does his contract count towards the 50 contract limit? I don't think it does while he's on his junior team, but am I wrong?
No, it
you're
won't
correct.
count.
See, look
It
at
will
this.
not count.
I sometimes I remember things. My memory is not what it used to be, but sometimes I do remember things. Obviously, I want to thank everyone who. Oh, go ahead.
I think really, no, and we don't need to get into it, but just worth mentioning. I thought, there were a couple guys we didn't even talk about that I thought were mentioned in the chat as well. Cop in Pittsburgh. I know Kevin sees him re-signing with the Rangers.
The Rangers would be stupid to let him go.
Andrew.
Yeah, they would be stupid. I agree. Max Domi could be a Penguin. Riley Smith, which I think Riley Smith is going to end up back in Vegas, but I could see Riley Smith be a Pittsburgh Penguin as well. I thought those were some good. I thought those were some good mentions.
Yeah, some good mentions for sure.
And the Gannon Larocque thing is that, I mean, because of his age and everything, slide over to the next year. So he definitely would not count. The only way he counts towards the 50 contract limit is if he plays on the Sharks this next season.
And I don't see that happening. I like the pick. Like, I was really sour on the pick when it first happened, but I've really come around on it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is it for tonight's show. I want to thank everyone who obviously joined us in the chat and obviously good input. If you have any feedback for us, definitely leave in the comments or tweet at us or whatever. If you want to tweet at me, I am at Ian Blogs Hockey, at Kevin Lacey 22, at hockey_jerk. Let us know how we did. Let us know what you think about the format of the show, any tweaks that you would make. We definitely love all that kind of feedback, and we hope to be back sooner than later. We haven't set a date yet, but it'll probably be sooner than later. So yeah, man, I mean, I hope everyone enjoyed. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Final thoughts for me, I'm at Kevin Lacey 22. I'm so happy to be on the show. I was not able to make most of the Teal Town USA shows this year, so I'm happy to be on with both of you. Jerk. But my final thoughts are winning breeds winning. And let's look at the teams that were eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs in the last round. We're talking about the Flames, the Hurricanes, the Panthers in particular. All three of those organizations are still alive in the conference finals in the Calder Cup playoffs, the AHL playoffs. The one team that was eliminated is in the second round. Actually, that was the Panthers. Boy, I'm slipping on the other. Oh my God, the Blues. So the Flames, the Blues, and the Hurricanes. The Panthers, their AHL club was eliminated in the second round as well. But the point of this is, I mentioned earlier, the Penguins, how they have a couple of guys that they could bring up to slide onto the NHL roster next season. Let's look at the three teams I mentioned: Flames, Blues, and Hurricanes. Still alive in the Calder Cup playoffs. Maybe next year they bring up a player or two who's currently winning, still playing and winning, up to the NHL team, and that gets them over the hump. Obviously, it only will work out for one of those teams, or maybe none, but still, I'm hoping the Sharks will get on that track. It seems like that's what they're looking for with their next GM, is creating a winning culture in the farm system before you create a winning culture in the NHL. And I'm fully behind that, and hope to see it here very, very soon. So thanks for having me, guys.
Did you go, Jerk? Are you good?
No. All I was saying is, I think I've always been very fascinated with the way Pittsburgh has been built, kind of ever since Jim Rutherford got in there and put his fingerprints all over things, and obviously now with Ron Hextall, with Brian Burke as well. Just the way they've been able to get the most out of a lot of guys while also keeping around that same core three guys of Crosby, Malkin, Letang. And I'm going to be interested. I don't I know we all like to think we're experts, but obviously if we were legitimate experts, we would have GM jobs throughout the league. But the things that we talked about, the ideas we had, I don't know, I feel like those were really good ideas. Like, I think any of them or I could like look at it and legitimately think, yeah, I could totally see Pittsburgh doing that just because of the way they build their team. And so I do wonder, kind of the theme that we said a lot, we were talking about is, what's next, or where do they go from here? And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Pittsburgh, just because it's kind of a, the top core is established and the supporting guys, it's always a bit of a mixed bag, revolving door. And I think it's an interesting dynamic. I'm interested to see where it goes after, 5 first-round exits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is really fun. I was a little nervous because, like, obviously, like, we always tried to, like, cram as, like, when we did shows last summer, like, we always tried to cram, like, a lot of different stuff in. Like, we wanted to have, like, the Sharks hook, and so... we kind of had a little fun today, but I thought this went really well. So I'm really, really happy with how this show went. I hope everyone agrees. And like I said, we look forward to your feedback on it. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So obviously, if you've missed us, I don't know if you've missed us, then you're not hearing this message. But in the off chance you are, don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the bell to find out when we will be on the YouTube channel. That way you know when we're going live. You can also find us wherever you get your podcast from in audio format. So that's SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, whatever. All that wonderful stuff. So obviously we look forward to seeing you guys on the next show. And we will do this again. Thanks for watching. And